This episode is supported by MonsterJoysticks.com. Level up your Raspberry Pi with their all-in-one arcade kit using genuine Sanwa arcade parts. And OneClickPrint.com for your photos on canvas, acrylic, gifts and more. Local craftsmen and global delivery.
Hello cave dwellers and welcome to another retro road trip. We happen to be in a bar today because it's the only place that we can fit all of the equipment we're looking at, and it's courtesy of collector and curator Mark. Mark, thank you for having us as your guests.
Welcome here.
What on earth have we got here?
What we have here is a Quantel Paintbox. This was released in 1981 and is involved in creating TV graphics for the big TV companies.
Quantel is a company that I must admit I hadn't heard of before I spoke to you, or indeed the Paintbox or their range of products. But I know for a fact that the things that this produces has been a part of my life, probably for my entire life, and I would bet for you guys as well. It's responsible for things that happen in news reports, weather reports, even the Olympic Games. This thing has been there and done that since the 1970s. This one from the 80s, this model in particular. Let's start with the company, Quantel. They're a British company. What did they set out to do when they came about? What did they want to do?
When they started, they realised that there was a really big future in producing TV programmes digitally and dispensing with all the analogue issues that you have when if you want to create graphics, then you have to have an artist who paints on a piece of card or transparency and actually places it in front of the camera. They realised that producing things digitally really does away with a lot of that, and this is part of that because this allows you to paint graphics on the screen to use later in the TV programme. The first use of the Paintbox was at the BBC was actually in the weather department.
It was it? Yeah. And the first recorded use of any Quantel product that I've seen was in the Winter Olympics in, I want to say 1974, it might have been 76, somewhere around there.
Yeah, I can't remember exactly which year it was, but they used a Quantel effects unit to actually create a picture-in-picture effect.
You've got several devices here dotted around the room that we're going to look at today, and working devices, so we can give you a demonstration. Let's take a look at this as the oldest device in your collection. And tell us, why do you collect these, Mark?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I was gifted a non-working Paintbox a number of years ago, and I started playing around with it, realised the amount of engineering that went into these was absolutely amazing. And from me trying to fix that broken one, I've ended up going down a bit of a rabbit hole, and I realised that there doesn't seem to be anybody else in the world collecting these or trying to keep them working.
Right. So you've taken it upon yourself to preserve these devices. And you mentioned the complexity and the engineering. We only need to open the front to get just a sneak peek at just how complex these things were. Yeah. Should we take a look inside?
Yeah, of course.
There's an absolutely huge amount of cards in here, Mark. What's going on?
One of the famous things about the Paintbox is all of the drawing functions are actually done in hardware. In a way, it's kind of like it's a GPU. Everything is done with hardware acceleration because the CPUs of the time simply weren't fast enough to allow an artist to draw naturally. This is not complete. There's a large hard disk that goes with this. It has a floppy drive, a tablet, keyboard. It is essentially a computer as well.
It is, okay. So loads of software in the normal way, but then everything is hardware assisted.
That's right.
These cards.
So there are two of these. All the software is contained on ROM. So there's no software to actually load in. That changed in later versions of the systems.
Okay. I'm seeing, is that a 68,000 CPU?
That is a 68,000, and I believe it's quite an early use of the 68,000, given that it was introduced in 1979. and this is a 1981 product.
Right, okay, so quite an early adopter of that CPU, and it wouldn't have been cheap at the time. As I can imagine, none of this would have been at the time. Do you have any retail price for what this would have cost?
Well, it didn't really have a retail price because it was sold to the type of people that didn't really. If you were asking about the product, you had the money to spend.
Sure.
But I believe a base machine like this would have been about £120,000 in 1981.
Okay.
The hard disk that it was supplied with would give you about 330 megabytes of storage, so you could probably get maybe 300 pictures or so.
This is a 1981 hard disk, so it must be a sizable unit.
14 inches,
14-inch platter.
45 kilos,
Yeah,
yes.
wow.
Yeah, it's a big bit of kit.
Yeah. So we've seen the guts of the machine and what makes it all tick, but how would you actually operate the machine?
Normally there would be a large tablet and a keyboard that would be sat with the operator to actually be able to operate this. Normally this would be put away in a rack somewhere, so it would be remotely located to the actual artist.
Okay, and it's a sizable tablet, and although we can't see this one in action, we have got other ones working with similar tablets, so you'll see that shortly. Why is this one not working for you? Does it need some repair work?
Yes, it has a number of issues. Primarily is the hard disk. Although the software is all contained on the ROMs, the system does require some fonts and brushes to be loaded off the hard disk.
Right.
So if you don't have a working hard disk, you can't boot the system.
Right, and presumably that was to make it easier to update your fonts and your brushes by having
Yes,
them on the
plus
hard disk.
they couldn't actually fit those into the EEPROMs. I think it was a storage issue.
Yeah. So this really served its purpose and served it quite well, but they didn't follow through with this architecture, did they? They changed it as they moved on and developed other products.
Yes, this obviously you can see this is a massive, huge product, and there's a huge 45 kilo hard disk that goes with this. And as computing power and products advanced in the 1980s, they realised that things could be shrunk down a lot, and a lot of cost saving done as well at the same time.
Right.
So after they created the Quantel Harry, which was a version of this which could do real-time video, they redesigned the whole system and introduced the V-Series.
Okay, and you have two examples of that V-Series over here.
I do.
Should we go and have a look at those?
Yes, let's.
Okay, let's have a look. Okay, Mark, so from 1981's Paintbox, what have we got here?
This is a Quantel V-Series system. So this is a version 2 of the original Paintbox. This was introduced really because of all the advances that have been happening in the computer industry. Hard disks were smaller, CPUs were more powerful, RAM was denser. So they repackaged the whole system into this much smaller system here, which can actually do video as well.
Yeah. So we've got two units making up this Harriet, which don't look dissimilar to a modern day rack-mounted server, I guess. Certainly industrial-looking units. I'm not seeing any 14-inch hard disks in there, so we've moved on from that.
That's right, yeah, thankfully they're just normal standard SCSI hard disks in there.
Yeah.
This particular system was actually also available as a desk side, so those panels that could be attached to the rack mount units to actually have it at the side of your desk as well. So it's quite clearly getting much more friendly in terms of the actual hardware.
Yeah. But it's still noisy enough that the operator would want to be sat some distance away.
Unfortunately.
And we've got the example here of the huge tablet and the keyboard that goes with it. And presumably some kind of stylus to go with this tablet.
Yes, I have one of the...
magically appeared.
One of the classic Quantel pens.
Okay. I've heard stories of people wearing these in their shirt pockets down to the bar after work to signify, yeah, we've got the money for Quantel devices.
That's right,
I'm
yeah.
a professional. Yeah.
In the advertising world, it really was that much of a thing to be producing your TV adverts and your program intros and things using Quantel's products.
Yeah, yeah. And specs-wise, this is still Motorola 68000 series based?
It is, yes. Slightly updated version of the 68010. although there's not really that much difference between the two.
Yeah, and how much RAM and hard disk space are we talking here?
The hard disk would typically have been about 500 megabytes back in the late 1980s, which is when they introduced the V series. The RAM, the main CPU board has 16 megabytes on, which is quite a lot for the 1980s.
And as we come to the late 80s, are we starting to see any desktop devices that might be able to perform some of these functions that might in some small way offer competition to this, or is this still in a league of its own?
Yes, there was definitely competition that Quantel had. Obviously, if you've got an Amiga, then you probably know things like the video toaster, which was certainly becoming a pretty good product back then. But the TV companies tended to go for the much higher value systems for reliability, usability, and things like that. So it kind of divided the market. You had the large TV companies with the money to spend, they would have a Quantel product. The smaller studios might go for something like a video toaster.
Yeah. Okay, well, I'm itching to have a go on this. So can you show me how to use it, Mark?
I can try.
Let's have a go.
Quantel Paintbox has a quite unique way of operating. It was designed to be used by an artist. It wasn't designed to be operated by a computer operator. So a lot of the functions are quite physical. You have to do sweeping gestures and things like that rather than tapping lots of menu options. So at the moment you can see on the screen there we've got a picture and we've got the menu up.
Okay.
So if we want to gain access to actually paint something on the screen, we have to swipe off the menu and you just swipe like that. And that can be done at either side, or I can even swipe up and swipe down to bring up the palette.
How many colours can we work with here?
Well, this is a true colour system, so that is true for the old Paintbox as well. So given the age of this, being able to work in full true colour is a pretty...
Way back in 81 in the case of the Paintbox, that is special. And this is a mixing area, is it? To mix up your colours. Can you show us how that works?
Yes. If I select a green and I just paint in here, we can sort of start painting a normal green. I take a yellow and actually start painting over the top of that to actually make some other colours I can then pick up and then start painting with.
Nice. Is this a pressure sensitive?
Yeah, it's fully pressure sensitive. Got another blue.
I've also noticed over here is something that is not dissimilar to a mouse, but it's definitely not a mouse. What is this?
Well, Quantel called it the rat. I'm not quite sure why. Maybe it just wasn't a mouse. It allows you quick access to some of the functions, primarily the animation functions that the Harriet has. So you'd hold the pen in one hand and then the rat in the other.
Okay. So you're loading the animation off of what's shown on the screen as a RAM recorder. What's that then? Is that just a stack of RAM that records, as it sounds like?
That's pretty much what it is.
Okay.
The Harriet was created to allow artists to generate about 12 seconds worth of animation. It doesn't sound a lot, but it was really used for program intros and title sequences like that. So you'd only have short sections where you need to do animation anyway. So the RAM recorder was a completely RAM-based storage medium to record the actual video into.
Just a huge stack of non-volatile memory.
The RAM recorder has 256 megabytes of RAM, and that was introduced in 1988.
256 meg RAM disk in 88. That could have been cheap. What strikes me is how quick it is to work on. There's no loading between frames, isn't there?
Yes, that was one of the big things that I hear about previous artists that used to use these systems, is how quick you could actually generate graphics and animations. Because of course, in the TV production world, you can't be hanging around waiting for things to load in and things like that. So it was a really, really quick system.
So that's a flavour of what the Harriet can do. We're going to go thoroughly modern now. We're going to go to 1996 for the next device, which is called what? The Paintbox?
Paintbox Express.
And we've actually got that one hooked up to a capture device. So we're not filming the monitor, we can give you a high quality captured image of what we're doing on it. So can you demonstrate that one to us?
Certainly.
Okay, let's take it. So we're sat now at the Quantel Paintbox Express, and hopefully through the magic of editing on the screen now you'll see a capture of exactly what I'm doing because I'm in control. And before we do that, I noticed the rat has evolved into what looks more like a fighter pilot stick.
Yes, yeah. To be honest, I think this does have some origins in an old joystick, I think.
So we've got a hat and a trigger button, but presumably they do the same things.
Yes,
as
yeah,
the rat.
it's exactly the same as the rat, just in a different form factor.
What does this offer, this 96 model, that the Harriet didn't?
The Express was a bit of an upgrade from the older system. The CPU was upgraded to a 68040, and it has 64 megabytes of RAM on the main CPU card, and there is also a lot of other expanded cards in there which provide more hardware accelerated functions. So one of the really quick things that you could do with a paint box was using the stencil. You could protect or allow you to paint in places of the picture that you want to concentrate on. So I've just got a quick demo set up here. We've just got a building here with quite a plain sky, and in this storage area we have a picture of some clouds. So what we're going to do is actually composite these two pictures together to give us clouds in the background there. So what we're going to quickly do is create a mask around this building here, and then paint in the clouds.
This kind of technique will be familiar to people who use, for example, Adobe Photoshop, or what else would we have been using in 1996? Maybe Paint Shop Pro or Deluxe Paint. And Quantel did actually try to take on Adobe and other companies in the courts, didn't they?
They did. The Paintbox had been around before Photoshop arrived in the late 1980s, if I recall correctly. But Quantel had a number of patents on various drawing functions that they thought they had created. It turned out that they were kind of true, but there had been a lot of research done in America with things like Super Paint, which predates all of these systems back into the early 70s. And although they weren't patented back then, they certainly existed before Quantel used similar stuff in the original Paintbox. So it kind of meant that their patents didn't really hold up.
And Adobe won the case in that
Adobe
situation.
did win, unfortunately. So I've got a stencil created which is masking off the sky in this picture. So what we can do now is use the restore function, and that will allow us to paint through these clouds into the sky of this picture. So I'm just going to reverse the stencil and use the airbrush to paint through those clouds pretty quickly.
That is almost as instant as you're stroking the pen there. That's very quick.
And you can see how quickly the Paintbox works to create some really quite convincing effects. The Paintbox Express, this particular one has an add-on package that Quantel sold called Transform FX, which allowed you to do some really quite interesting effects using the brushes. If I select, say, just a round brush, as we have here, and go into the Transform FX, so what that's done is just converted various pixels there to that round brush. But what we can actually do with that is actually control a lot of the parameters based on that. So we can shrink the spacing between the points down and actually change the size So in addition to manipulating the picture, we can also manipulate all the colours and things in it to actually do colour correction and things like that. So one of the unique functions that you could actually do with the Paintbox Express was some of the 3D warping options. So what I'm going to do here is just cut out this entire picture. And what this allows us to do is to take these points and actually start stretching and warping them to create some really quite cool effects. And this is actually working in 3D, so I can actually spin this around. You'll actually see that I've actually started to.
It has actually extruded in a third dimension.
Now this was a feature that was really only available on the Paintbox Express. It requires extra cards to be installed in the machine, so that would have been a very costly option back in the day. I've heard it probably would have been around about £20,000 option to be able to do that kind of effect. But obviously in 1996, being able to do things like that and combining it with the animation features and the camcorder, you could create
and the quality of the output.
Yeah, this is full broadcast TV quality. Yeah.
The impressiveness is not only the picture that you've created, but also the speed at which it's generated.
Yeah, it's very, very fast. Quantel were quite proud of their engineering skills in being able to manipulate not necessarily real-time graphics, although later machines were able to do that, but actually being able to have the artist not wait around for things to render out and things like that, to actually be able to preview things really, really quickly. I think was a key thing in the production process, I think.
Yeah. Mark, I feel like we've really scratched the surface today of what these can do. They're obviously very powerful machines, or very powerful machines for the time. What became of Quantel and their Paintbox range?
The Paintboxes they died out in the early noughties, where they started to switch to, instead of having this fully custom hardware solution with all their own software and everything like that, they tended to switch over to using PCs. And you could probably argue that Quantel's fortunes were waning a little bit by then, because these old systems were all custom designed. The hardware is completely unique to this system, because back in the 1980s when they created a system like this, they could only operate and make them like that. The CPUs weren't fast enough, so it all had to be done in hardware. But that changed as the 90s came along and we had more powerful processors, and systems became more generic, like the PC, and you had other systems like Apple Macs and the Commodore Amiga. It tended to switch to a more software model, which I think kind of left Quantel behind a little bit. They had such a great expertise in hardware that they probably just didn't know which way to turn, really. They're now called SAM, which is Snell Advanced Media. That is a bit of a merger between Quantel and another company. There's not really much legacy left in that company now with these old systems. It's been pretty much erased from their history, as it were. They don't use the Quantel name anymore, and references to the old Quantel systems don't seem to exist anymore on their website.
Yeah. Well, it's been a pleasure exploring these obviously quite rare systems. We can find out more on your YouTube channel, can't we, Dexter's Lab?
Yes, I've got my own YouTube channel, which is a mixture of lots of different eclectic things, but including the old Quantel products.
And a lot more detailed demonstrations of how these work. You've got some quite long videos that really, really do go into the details. So if you enjoyed seeing a flavour of what these machines can do today, then go and subscribe to Mark's channel. Go and find out a lot more. And I think you'll be surprised. The more you watch it, the more you realise, I've seen this before. I've seen this ident, I've seen this intro, and I didn't know it was produced on a Quantel Paintbox. It's quite eye-opening. It's quite a rabbit hole to fall down.
Yeah.
Mark, thank you very much for your time today. And yeah, go and find out more on Mark's channel. Thanks for watching, guys. Take care.
See you soon.
If you enjoy my content and would like to toss a coin into the hat to support the cave, then check out patreon.com/retromancave and join the official cave dwellers you can see on the screen now. Thank you for your support.